Caleb Morgan lived alone on a quiet ranch at the edge of the Arizona Territory. His land stretched far out toward the dry desert, where the sun burned the earth each day without mercy. He had grown used to silence. Some days he heard only the wind pushing dust along the ground, or the soft calls of birds hiding under thin pieces of shade. He had no family left, no neighbors close by, and no one who ever stopped for a friendly visit. His life was simple. Wake up, feed the animals, fix broken fences, ride out to check on the cattle, and return home to a lonely dinner. On one of the hottest days of the season, the sun felt heavier than usual. Caleb wiped sweat from his face again and again as he rode his horse across the open land. The ground showed small waves of heat dancing above it. Even the horse breathed with difficulty. Caleb wanted to return home soon, but something on the horizon caught his eye. A thin line of smoke rose slowly into the bright sky. It was too far from any ranch house to be normal. He stared for a moment, wondering if it came from travelers, or worse, from someone in trouble. Curiosity and concern pushed him forward. He guided his horse toward the rising smoke. The ride felt painfully long under the burning sun, and the heat made everything unclear. But Caleb kept moving. As he got closer, he realized it was not a campfire, but the remains of one. It was already dying, the last bits of smoke curling upward as if trying to escape into the sky. The place looked abandoned. There were broken footprints in the sand, pieces of cloth, and signs that someone had left in a hurry. Caleb climbed down from his horse and walked around quietly. He didn't know what he expected to find, but his stomach tightened when he heard a faint sound. It was soft, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. He paused, listening more carefully. Then he heard it again, a small cry. Weak and trembling, he followed the sound and discovered a figure lying on the ground behind a group of rocks. It was a woman, an Apache woman, young but exhausted, her skin burning from the heat. Her long, dark hair lay scattered across the dry sand. She tried to lift her head when she heard him approach, but she couldn't hold it up for long. Caleb quickly crouched beside her, speaking softly so she wouldn't panic. She didn't move much. Her eyes barely stayed open. He saw she had no water, no shade, and no strength left in her body. Caleb knew she would not survive the heat if he did nothing. He pulled out his water flask and gently touched it to her lips. She drank only a little at first, like she was afraid it might disappear too soon. He encouraged her to take more. She swallowed slowly, her breathing calming with each sip. When she had enough strength to speak, she whispered a few broken words in English. Telling him her name was Nayeli, Caleb understood just enough. Her voice shook as she tried to explain that bandits had attacked the area. Her group separated while running for safety. She had fallen behind, too tired and thirsty to keep up. She had walked alone for hours until her legs finally failed her. She didn't remember how long she had been lying under the sun. Caleb spoke gently, telling her she was safe now. He lifted her with care, surprised by how light she felt. She didn't resist. She seemed too weak to even worry. He carried her to his horse and placed her in the saddle, climbing up behind her so she wouldn't fall. Her head rested lightly against his chest, her breathing slow but steady. He wrapped one arm around her to support her as he turned the horse toward home. The ride back to the ranch was quiet except for the wind. Caleb felt her shift occasionally, like she was trying to keep herself awake. Once, she opened her eyes and looked up at him with a mixture of fear and trust. He nodded at her, hoping to show she was in good hands. She relaxed a little after that, letting her eyes close again. When they reached the ranch, Caleb carried her into his cabin. The place was small but clean. He laid her gently on his own bed, placing a thin blanket over her. Then he rushed to fill a bowl with clean water and brought it to her side. She opened her eyes again when she felt his presence. He dipped a cloth into the water and touched it to her forehead to cool her down. She let out a soft sigh, as if it was the first relief she had felt in days. Caleb watched her closely. He had seen wounded animals before, and injured travelers too. But something about Nayeli made him feel a deeper responsibility. Maybe it was the way she looked so alone in the world. Maybe it was how she had tried to survive even when her body was failing. Or maybe it was just that he had not cared for another human being in a long time. He prepared a small meal, bread, beans, and a little soup. When she was ready, he helped her sit up. She ate slowly, carefully, each bite giving her a little more life. While she ate, Caleb stayed quiet, not wanting to overwhelm her with questions. When she finally finished, she leaned back against the pillow, her eyes soft and calmer. After a long pause, she spoke. Her words were quiet but full of meaning. She said, "You saved me. I won't forget." Caleb felt a strange warmth in his chest. He simply nodded again, not knowing what to say. He was not used to gratitude, or to company, or to someone looking at him with such sincerity. As the sun set behind the hills, the cabin filled with a comforting orange light. Outside, the desert cooled at last, and a gentle wind blew through the open window. Caleb pulled a chair beside the bed and sat there, unsure if she needed anything else. Nayeli looked at him one more time, her eyes heavy with sleep. Then she whispered something he almost didn't hear. It sounded like a promise, though he wasn't sure. Her breathing became slow and steady as she drifted into deep rest. Caleb stayed beside her for a long time, watching over her. He didn't know what the next day would bring, or how her presence would change his quiet life. All he knew was that the loneliness in his chest felt a little less sharp now. Someone was under his roof. Someone who needed him. Someone he had saved. And as night settled across the ranch, he felt something he had not felt in years: hope. The next morning, sunlight quietly entered the cabin and warmed the wooden floor. Caleb woke early, as he always did, but this time he moved more carefully. He didn't want to wake Nayeli too soon. She still needed rest. When he glanced toward the bed, he saw her sleeping peacefully, her breathing soft and steady. The color in her face looked better than the day before, and Caleb felt relieved. He stepped outside to start his morning chores. The air was cooler in the early hours, but he knew the heat would rise again soon. He carried buckets of water to the animals, fixed a broken fence rail, and checked the cattle. Yet something felt different. He found himself thinking about the woman resting in his cabin. He wondered if she would be scared when she woke. He wondered if she would feel safe with him. And he wondered what would happen once she healed. When he returned to the cabin, Nayeli was awake. She sat quietly on the edge of the bed, looking around the room as if trying to understand where she was. Her eyes followed every simple detail: the table, the shelves, the old boots by the door. Then she noticed Caleb standing there. For a moment she looked startled, but her expression softened when she recognized him. Caleb greeted her gently and asked if she was thirsty. She nodded. He poured water into a cup and handed it to her carefully. She held it with both hands, drinking slowly as if the cup carried something precious. Afterward, she thanked him in soft, careful English. Her voice still sounded tired, but stronger than before. He asked if she felt well enough to eat. And when she nodded again, he prepared a simple breakfast: warm bread, fresh milk, and berries he had stored. She ate quietly. But Caleb could see her eyes studying him now and then. It wasn't fear, it was curiosity mixed with gratitude. She seemed to be trying to understand the man who had carried her out of the desert. When she finished eating, she stood up slowly, testing her legs. Caleb stepped forward in case she lost her balance, but she managed to stay steady. She told him she wanted to help, even though she was not fully healed yet. Caleb gently told her she didn't need to work. But Nayeli shook her head. Helping made her feel alive again. And she didn't want to feel useless. So Caleb allowed her to do small tasks around the cabin, folding blankets, sweeping the floor with slow, careful movements, and helping prepare food. She moved with quiet grace, like she was used to working with her hands. Every now and then, she paused to rest. And Caleb reminded her she didn't need to push herself, but she simply smiled and continued. As the day passed, they began to talk more. Their conversations were simple at first. Nayeli spoke in short sentences, choosing her words carefully, and Caleb spoke slowly so she could understand. She told him she was from a nearby Apache band. She had 2 younger siblings and a mother, all of whom she hoped were safe. Caleb listened with calm patience, never interrupting her. When Caleb spoke about his life, Nayeli listened with the same attentiveness. He told her he had lived alone for many years since his parents passed. He never married, not because he didn't want to, but because he never met someone who felt right for his quiet, simple world. Nayeli didn't ask many questions, but she seemed to understand the loneliness behind his words. Later in the afternoon, Caleb noticed her watching the open land from the window. Her eyes held a mixture of longing and sadness. He knew she was thinking about her family and tribe. The desert was not just land to her, it was home. Caleb approached her gently and told her he wanted to help her find her people once she regained her strength. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her eyes lowered, her hands tightening against each other. Finally, she looked up at him and whispered, "You help me." "Even though I am not from your world," Caleb nodded simply. "You needed help. Anyone would have done the same." Nayeli shook her head softly. "Not everyone." The quiet honesty in her words touched Caleb in a way he didn't expect. He had lived his life doing what he believed was right, but he never thought it mattered much to anyone else. Now he felt seen in a way he hadn't felt in years. That evening, the 2 of them sat outside for fresh air. The sky glowed in shades of orange and gold as the sun sank behind distant hills. The cooler wind brushed against them, carrying the scents of dry grass and earth. Nayeli sat on the small wooden step near the door, while Caleb sat on a barrel beside her. They didn't need many words. The peaceful view spoke enough. After some time, Nayeli broke the silence. She said she didn't know why fate brought her to his land, but she was grateful. She told him she felt safe here, more than she expected to feel in a stranger's home. Caleb listened quietly. He wasn't a man who knew how to express deep emotions easily, but something inside him warmed at her words. He told her she could stay until she was ready to leave. He promised her food, safety, and time. He didn't want her to feel pressured or trapped. Nayeli looked down at her hands again, then back at him. There was a hint of something fragile in her eyes, something like fear of losing this place of calm. She asked softly, "If I leave, will you be alone again?" Caleb didn't expect the question, and it caught his breath for a moment. He answered honestly, "Yes, but I've lived alone for a long time. You don't have to worry about me." Nayeli looked away, her expression troubled. She wasn't ready to say what was in her heart, but her silence spoke enough. She had known fear, danger, and uncertainty in recent days, but here, in this small cabin with a gentle rancher, she found something she didn't expect: comfort. When the sky turned dark, they went back inside. Caleb made sure she had fresh water and a comfortable place to sleep. Before lying down, she turned toward him and gave a small, grateful nod. Caleb returned it with a warm smile. As she rested, her thoughts were full of questions. Would her family be alive? Would her tribe accept her return after being missing? And if she left, would she ever feel this kind of safety again? Meanwhile, Caleb sat in his chair, trying to distract himself by sharpening a tool, but his mind kept drifting toward her. He didn't understand why her presence affected him so deeply, but he couldn't deny that the ranch already felt less empty with her in it. Before her eyes closed fully, Nayeli spoke in a soft voice. "When I am strong again, will you really help me find them?" Caleb looked at her with steady kindness. "I will. You have my word." She nodded slowly, comforted not just by the promise but by the way he said it with sincerity. Not duty. As she drifted into sleep again, Caleb watched over her. He wasn't sure what the coming days would bring, but he already knew something was changing. The silence he once accepted as normal now felt different. It felt like something new was taking shape, something gentle, unexpected, and possibly important. The desert outside stretched wide and wild, but inside the cabin, 2 lives had quietly begun to move toward each other. The morning of their journey began quietly. The air felt cooler than usual, and a soft gray light covered the land. Caleb saddled his horse and packed water, dried food, blankets, and a small medical pouch. Every movement he made carried a sense of responsibility. He was preparing not just for himself but for Nayeli too. She stood near the doorway, watching him with calm, serious eyes. She looked stronger than before, though she still moved with care. Her long dark hair was tied back, and she carried a small pouch of herbs she had made from the plants around the ranch. Caleb walked over and handed her a canteen. She took it with a quiet, "Thank you." Even though her English was still simple, she used each word with meaning. He told her they would ride slowly so she wouldn't get tired too quickly. She nodded, grateful for his patience. They rode out when the sun began to rise. The sky turned from gray to soft orange, and the desert came alive with light. Caleb rode in front, letting his horse set a steady pace. Nayeli rode behind him on the same horse, holding onto the saddle with one hand and keeping her other hand near the small pouch at her side. At first, their journey was easy. The land was flat and silent, with only the sound of the horses' hooves and the wind brushing over the dry bushes. Nayeli pointed to certain plants or rocks now and then, explaining their names or uses. Caleb listened with interest. He realized she knew the land far better than he ever could. Every stone and shadow meant something to her. As the sun rose higher, the air grew hotter. Caleb checked the canteen often, making sure Nayeli drank enough water. She tried not to take too much, but he insisted she drink. Her safety mattered more than supplies. By noon, the ground shimmered with heat. The dirt trails looked like long paths of gold under the sun. Caleb suggested they rest under the shade of a small rocky overhang. They climbed down, stretched their stiff legs, and shared a meal of dried fruit and bread. Nayeli sat with her knees pulled close, looking thoughtful. She told Caleb more about her family, her younger brother who liked to carve small animals out of wood, her mother who taught her how to use herbs, and her little sister who always followed her everywhere. Caleb listened quietly. He knew how hard it must be for her to wonder if they were alive or safe. Caleb shared a bit of his own past too. He spoke about his father teaching him how to ride, and his mother who loved to plant wildflowers around the house. Nayeli seemed surprised that he once had flowers growing here. She gave a small smile, saying she would have liked to see them. Their rest didn't last long. Storm clouds began forming in the distance, dark and heavy. Caleb knew desert storms could come suddenly, turning soft sand into dangerous wind. They mounted the horse again and continued forward, hoping to pass the open area before the winds arrived. But the storm approached faster than expected. A strong gust of wind swept across them, blowing sand into the air. Nayeli held onto Caleb tightly, burying her face against his back to avoid the dust. Caleb leaned low, guiding the horse against the wind. The air stung their skin, and the world looked blurry, but Caleb kept moving with steady hands. After what felt like hours, they reached a narrow canyon where the wind calmed. The walls of stone blocked most of the sand, giving them a chance to breathe. Nayeli slid down from the horse and coughed softly. Caleb helped her drink water and checked her eyes to make sure no sand damaged them. She whispered that she was fine, though her voice was tired. They walked deeper into the canyon, leading the horse on foot. The path was narrow and winding. High cliffs rose above them, turning the sound of their footsteps into echoes. The storm still roared outside, but in here, they felt sheltered. Nayeli walked beside Caleb, sometimes touching the canyon walls, as if they felt familiar to her. She said her people often traveled through similar places. As they moved forward, Nayeli suddenly stopped and pointed to the ground. Caleb knelt where she indicated. There, pressed into the dirt, were footprints, not from animals, but from people. Some tracks looked fresh. Nayeli's eyes widened with hope and worry. These could be her tribe's tracks, or someone else entirely. They followed the footprints carefully. The canyon turned left, then right, then opened into a wider space where the land stretched again. The wind was weak here, only carrying gentle dust. Nayeli knelt near a small pile of stones. Someone had placed them in a pattern. She touched them and explained it was a sign, a message left by her people. It told that some members of the tribe had traveled north, searching for safe ground. Caleb felt a weight lift from his chest. They were getting closer. They continued walking until the sun began to drop. The sky shifted to pink and gold, shining across the land. They found another mark, a piece of cloth caught on a bush. Nayeli picked it up with shaking hands. It belonged to her little sister. Her voice trembled as she said her name, relief mixing with fear. Caleb placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. She looked up at him, her eyes full of emotion. She whispered, "They were here. They live." Caleb nodded, encouraged by her certainty, but their relief faded when they discovered more signs, broken arrows scattered on the ground, boot prints mixed with moccasin prints, and marks that showed running. Caleb crouched and inspected everything. His experience told him that someone had chased her tribe. It must have been recent, maybe only a day or two earlier. Nayeli looked pale. She hugged the cloth to her chest and stared at the horizon. Caleb knew her thoughts were going dark, imagining the worst. He gently told her they would follow the trail and reach her family. He promised he wouldn't stop. Nayeli listened, though fear stayed in her eyes. They rode again, following the direction the tracks led. Each mile grew heavier with tension. The sun dipped lower, painting the desert in long shadows. Caleb could feel Nayeli's heartbeat through her hold on his waist. She was strong, but fear for her family made her breath uneven. Late in the evening, they reached a ridge overlooking a valley. Caleb stopped the horse and pointed. Down below, near a group of trees, smoke rose from a small camp. Figures moved around it. Many figures. Nayeli's heart jumped. She whispered her mother's name under her breath. But Caleb saw something else, several armed men circling the camp edge. They weren't Apache. They looked like bandits or scouts, watching the tribe from a distance, waiting. Caleb tightened his grip on the reins. Nayeli's hope mixed with fear again. The camp held her people, but danger surrounded them. And Caleb knew, from this moment forward, their journey wouldn't just be about finding her tribe, it would be about keeping them alive. Caleb and Nayeli stayed hidden behind a group of large rocks on the ridge, looking down into the valley. The camp below clearly belonged to Nayeli's tribe. Caleb could see small tents made from hides, a circle of stones where a fire burned gently, and several people moving around with tired steps. From the way they walked, he could tell they had traveled far and were worn out. Children sat close to their mothers, and older men kept watch with bows in hand. But there was something else in the air besides routine, a feeling of fear, like the tribe was waiting for something bad to happen. On the far side of the valley, Caleb spotted the danger he feared. Half hidden by trees, a group of men watched the tribe. They wore rough, mismatched clothing and carried rifles. Even from the ridge, Caleb recognized the posture of men who waited for a chance to strike. He didn't know if they were the same bandits who attacked Nayeli's group earlier, but their presence meant trouble. More than trouble, it meant the tribe was trapped. Nayeli's breath caught as she stared at her people, her eyes filled with relief, fear, and longing all at once. She whispered softly, naming the figures she recognized: her mother, her brother, some older warriors she once respected. She saw them all, but she also saw the danger surrounding them. Her hands trembled as she held the cloth that belonged to her sister. Caleb placed a steady hand on her shoulder. She looked at him, her voice shaking as she asked, "What will they do? Why are those men watching?" Caleb explained gently that the bandits were waiting until the tribe grew more tired or until night came. They probably wanted supplies, horses, maybe more. Nayeli's face grew pale at the thought. She whispered that her people had little left to defend themselves. They had lost many things already while escaping the first attack. Caleb's jaw tightened. He had never been a hero, never someone who rushed into danger. But he could not walk away now. Not when the people below were the family Nayeli had fought to find. Not when they were tired and unable to defend themselves. And not when he had promised her he would help her. He told Nayeli they needed a plan. She listened with full attention, though her fear was clear. Caleb knew they could not fight the bandits directly, not with only one rifle and limited ammunition. But maybe they didn't have to fight. Maybe they just needed to warn the tribe and help them escape before danger closed in. The first step was reaching the camp without alarming the tribe's watchmen. Apache warriors were skilled and alert. If they saw a man sneaking in from the shadows, they would shoot first and ask later. Nayeli suggested she go alone because her people would recognize her immediately. Caleb agreed, though he didn't like the idea of her walking into danger by herself, but she reminded him that without their trust, nothing would work. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, the land turned golden, then slowly dark. Shadows stretched across the desert floor. Caleb waited in silence as Nayeli positioned herself to descend safely into the valley. She moved quietly, with the careful steps of someone raised in the wilderness. Even weakened, she carried the spirit of her people. He watched until she was far enough down that he could no longer see her clearly. Every second she was out of his sight felt heavy. He kept scanning the tree line where the bandits hid. They had not moved yet, but he could feel the tension from here. Like a storm gathering behind the clouds, Nayeli approached the camp slowly. As expected, a young Apache warrior spotted movement and aimed his bow toward her. She raised both hands and called out her name loudly in her native language. Caleb couldn't hear the words clearly, but he could hear the emotion in her voice, a mix of desperation and relief. Suddenly, the camp erupted with movement. Her mother ran forward first, tears streaming down her face as she embraced her daughter. Children gathered around, crying and shouting with joy. Older warriors came next, staring at her as if she were a ghost returned from the dead. Caleb watched from the ridge, feeling a warmth spread through him. He had never seen a reunion so full of emotion. After the tears came the questions. Nayeli spoke quickly, pointing toward the trees where the danger waited. Caleb could see the expressions of the warriors sharpen. They understood immediately. Within moments, the camp shifted from joy to fear. Warrior after warrior prepared weapons, though their numbers were few and they were exhausted. Caleb knew this wasn't enough. They didn't just need warning, they needed a way out. He took a deep breath and made a decision. He mounted his horse and rode down a different path, keeping to the shadows. He wanted to reach the edge of the camp without startling anyone. So he approached slowly. When he was close enough, Nayeli saw him and waved the others to stay calm. She hurried to him, her mother holding her arm tightly. She told Caleb that the tribe believed her, but they didn't know how to escape without being seen. They had injured children, tired families, and very little strength left. Caleb looked around the camp. The people were brave, but they were at their limit. He asked the warriors to show him the land around the camp. They led him to the back of the valley, where a narrow passage lay between two tall cliffs. It was almost invisible if someone didn't know exactly where to look. Nayeli said her people used it long ago, but the path had become dangerous with loose rocks. Still, it was their only chance. Caleb studied the path. It was steep, but with care, the tribe could move through it under cover of darkness. The bandits would not expect anyone to escape that way because it looked too dangerous. Now they needed a distraction, something to pull the bandits away from their watch. Caleb stepped forward before the warriors could speak. He said he would create the distraction. Nayeli immediately shook her head, fear returning to her face. She begged him not to put himself at risk, but Caleb gently told her that sometimes doing the right thing meant danger. He reminded her that he had lived through many hard years alone. If he could give her people a chance to survive, the risk was worth it. Nayeli's eyes filled with emotion. She clutched his arm and told him she didn't want to lose him after finding him. Caleb felt her worry deeply, but he stayed steady. He gave her a small, reassuring smile and said she would not lose him. He promised he would return. The warriors agreed to guide their people through the hidden passage once Caleb created the distraction. They prepared quietly, packing whatever little they had, tying blankets around children's shoulders, and checking every weapon twice. When the last rays of light faded, Caleb moved toward the front of the valley. He lit a small torch and dragged it across dry bushes, creating a controlled line of fire. Smoke rose into the night sky. It was enough to draw attention, but not enough to start a dangerous blaze. The bandits moved from their hiding spot, confused and alarmed. They ran toward the smoke, trying to find what caused it. In that moment, the tribe moved silently toward the hidden passage. Nayeli stayed near the back, helping the elderly walk. She kept turning around to look for Caleb, her heart tight with fear. Caleb, after dropping the torch, slipped into the shadows and circled back toward the camp. He could see the tribe vanishing into the passage one by one. He knew he had to keep the bandits distracted a little longer. He picked up a handful of stones and threw them deeper into the trees. The noise echoed, making the bandits think they were being watched from different sides. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, when the last of the tribe disappeared through the passage, Caleb allowed himself a slow breath. He turned to follow, but a snapping branch behind him made him spin around. One of the bandits had spotted him. The man raised his rifle, but Caleb ducked behind a fallen log and sprinted toward the passage. The bandit shouted, alerting the others, and several footsteps came crashing through the trees. Caleb ran as fast as he could, the shadows twisting around him. Just as he reached the passage entrance, Nayeli appeared with a warrior beside her. She saw him running and froze in fear. Caleb urged them to go deeper, but they ran forward instead, pulling him inside just as gunshots echoed behind them. Inside the passage, the tribe waited silently in the dark. Nayeli held Caleb's arm tightly, her face full of relief and worry. He breathed hard, catching his breath, but he managed to give her a small smile. The tribe had escaped. They were safe for now, and Nayeli looked at Caleb as if she had found not just a rescuer, but someone whose courage had changed everything. The hidden passage stretched long and uneven, twisting between tall cliffs that blocked most of the moonlight. The narrow path forced everyone to move slowly, placing their feet carefully so they wouldn't slip on loose stones. Caleb stayed near the back of the group with Nayeli, making sure the last families didn't fall behind. Every now and then, he looked over his shoulder to make sure no one was following them. The bandits' voices faded behind the stone walls, but he didn't relax. Not yet. Nayeli walked close to him, her hand lightly gripping his arm for support. She tried to hide her worry, but Caleb could feel the tension in her steps. She had been brave the whole journey, yet this moment carried a different kind of fear. She was so close to losing her family earlier, and now she feared losing Caleb too. She kept glancing at him, checking that he was unharmed from the chase. When the passage finally opened into a wider canyon, the tribe gathered to rest. Children sat on the ground, leaning on their mothers. Warriors stood guard at the entrance, listening for any sound of danger. The moon lit the canyon gently, painting the rocks with a cool silver glow. After a tiring journey, the tribe finally felt safe enough to breathe freely. Nayeli's mother approached them with tears in her eyes. She embraced Nayeli tightly, whispering words in their native language. The relief on her face softened the sharp lines of her worry. She then looked at Caleb with gratitude deep enough that words were hardly needed. She placed her hand over her heart, bowing her head slightly. Caleb returned the gesture respectfully, humbled by the quiet honor. As the tribe settled around small fires, warriors began discussing what would happen next. Some wanted to head north to find a safer place. Others wanted to return to their main settlement. Caleb didn't speak unless spoken to. He sat near the edge of the group, sharpening a small knife, trying to give the tribe space to make their decisions. He had helped them escape, but their path forward was theirs to choose. Nayeli sat beside him, her small bundle of belongings resting on her lap. Her mind was full of thoughts she wasn't sure how to express. She had found her people, the ones she feared she might never see again. Her heart was full of relief, gratitude, and love for her family. But when she looked toward Caleb, something deeper stirred inside her. He had saved her life. He had promised to help her, and he kept every promise without asking for anything in return. He stood between her tribe and danger without hesitation. And he wasn't one of her people. He wasn't tied to her by blood or tribe or obligation. He did everything simply because he cared. As she watched him, she realized her journey was not yet finished. Nayeli's brother, a young boy with bright, determined eyes, approached them and spoke to Caleb. Though his English was limited, he managed to say thank you in a shy, earnest voice. Caleb smiled warmly, ruffling the boy's hair. It was the gentle kind of smile that softened Caleb's otherwise quiet and serious face. Watching this small moment made something tighten in Nayeli's chest. When most of the tribe began preparing to sleep, Nayeli stood and walked to her mother. They spoke in soft voices, their words too quiet for Caleb to hear. He noticed Nayeli's mother glance in his direction several times, her eyes thoughtful, as if she was studying him through the glow of the fire. After a long conversation, Nayeli returned to him. Caleb looked up at her, waiting for her to speak. Her eyes were calm but emotional, shining softly under the moonlight. She sat beside him again, her hands folded nervously in her lap. She wanted to speak many things at once, but her voice came out slowly, choosing each word with care. She told him that her tribe would leave at dawn. It was the safest time to travel before heat returned. Caleb nodded. He had expected that. He didn't want to stand in the way of their safety, and he certainly didn't want to bring more danger around them. But Nayeli hesitated. She looked at the fires, at her people, at the canyon walls, and finally back at him. Her voice trembled lightly as she said, "When we leave, you will go back to your ranch?" Caleb nodded again. "Yes," he said. Life would return to what it was before, quiet, simple, lonely. Nayeli lowered her eyes. She felt her chest tighten painfully. She knew what returning to that empty cabin meant for him. She had seen how his silence carried weight. She had seen how he watched over her with quiet care. How he spoke gently even when he didn't need to. How he risked his life for her people. She realized she didn't want him to be alone again. Finally, she lifted her head and met his eyes. Her voice was soft but full of courage. "I do not want you to be alone," she whispered. "I want to stay with you." Caleb froze. For a moment, he wondered if he heard her correctly. Nayeli looked at him steadily, her eyes filled with something honest and deep. She explained in her simple English that she felt safe with him in a way she had not felt anywhere else. She told him that his kindness had changed her life. She told him that she wanted to choose her own path, not one decided by fear or tradition. Caleb's heart beat faster. He had lived many years without expecting someone to choose him. The idea felt unreal. He asked if she was sure. He reminded her that her family needed her. He didn't want her to feel torn or guilty. Nayeli shook her head, tears in her eyes, not of sadness, but of certainty. She said her mother understood. Her mother had seen how she looked at Caleb and had given her blessing. Nayeli said her tribe would always be her home, but her future didn't have to be bound to one place. She wanted her life to continue beside the man who showed her nothing but respect, courage, and care. Caleb swallowed hard, emotions rising in his chest. He didn't know what to say at first. He had not expected companionship, love, or a future shared with someone from a world so different from his own. But when he looked into her eyes, he felt something strong and warm, something he hadn't felt in many years. He told her she would never be unwelcome at his ranch. He told her she brought light into a place that had been empty for too long. He told her that if she wished to stay, he would accept her with all his heart. Nayeli's tears fell gently, but she smiled, a soft, beautiful smile touched by moonlight. It wasn't a smile of relief, but a smile of decision. The next morning, when the tribe prepared to leave, Nayeli stood beside Caleb with her small bundle in hand. The tribe gathered around her mother, who approached Caleb with quiet respect. She thanked him in her own language, placing a beaded bracelet into his hands, a sign of trust and gratitude. Then she embraced Nayeli tightly. There were tears, but no resistance. Her mother knew this was her daughter's choice. Warriors nodded to Caleb, acknowledging his courage. Children waved goodbye. And when the tribe moved north, Nayeli did not walk with them. She stayed beside Caleb, watching them leave until they became small shapes on the horizon. Then she turned toward him. "I stay," she said softly, "not because I am lost, but because I choose you." Those words settled deep in Caleb's heart. He nodded, unable to speak for a moment. They mounted his horse together and began the long ride back to the ranch. The journey home felt calmer than the journey before. The land seemed softer, the wind gentler. Nayeli leaned lightly against Caleb, her presence warm and steady. When they reached the ranch, the sun was setting. painting the sky in gold just like the evening she first arrived. This time, she didn't lie weak in his bed or sit quietly in the corner. She stepped into the cabin confidently, like it was now her home too. Caleb watched her with a soft warmth in his eyes. The ranch no longer felt empty. The silence no longer felt heavy. And as the sun dipped behind the hills, Nayeli took Caleb's hand gently and said the words that had been in her heart since the day he saved her. "You saved me. Now I stay forever." And Caleb knew his life had changed, not with noise or chaos, but with quiet, steady love.